Hello. Welcome to her live stream episode of Always Andy's Mom. This will be episode 177. And we are having all sorts of technical difficulties today. So, this is why I don't do things live normally. This is why I record things a month ahead of time. But I think I have Gwen on now. Hopefully, we don't have too much of a lag and we'll be able to kind of understand each other. So, we will see how this goes. All right. So the topic that I wanted to talk about today was just because I noticed that the release of the episode will be in 2 days, which is Groundhog Day. And if you are not from the United States, you probably do not know, have not heard of Groundhog Day. But Groundhog Day is a day in the tradition of the United States in Pennsylvania. It's like this town in Pennsylvania where the groundhog will come up, and if it sees its shadow, it's scared and it goes back down into the hole, and you're going to have 6 more weeks of winter. And if it stays up, it means spring is just around the corner. Now, of course, that makes no sense at all, especially because if it's a nice sunny day, you would think that would be more spring, not the opposite. But what makes me think about Groundhog Day is then 30 years ago now, I cannot believe it's been 30 years, but 30 years ago now, there was a movie called Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. And in that movie, every day is Groundhog Day. So he is a reporter and he goes to report on Groundhog Day, and he really has a very bad attitude about going to this town and reporting it. But he gets to the end of the day and he goes to bed and he wakes up, and the next day is again Groundhog Day. So it goes over and over and over and over. And by the end of the movie, I mean, in the middle of the movie, he's kind of a mess and he's just deciding, I'm going to like run my car off the road and try to die to end this day. But he's just, no matter what he does, he wakes up and it's that. But by the end of the movie, he's starting to do good things with it. Like he goes in and takes 1 day of piano lessons every day from a little piano teacher. And he gets amazing on the piano. He starts doing things for people and just helping people. And so I thought really that our grief is so much like that when we are grieving, every day feels exactly the same. And you wake up and you're living this nightmare again and again and again. And sometimes you do things that are counterproductive and are not going to be healthy and helpful to you at all. But hopefully somewhere down the road, you start changing a little bit and start having a little bit of purpose in your life again, and maybe help people if you can. So anyway, that's kind of where we're going with this episode, about how everything can feel the same, but hopefully it's not. And I just wanted kind of some input from Gwen on this topic.
Yeah. Well, there's actually several articles written about how grief is like Groundhog's Day.
Really? I didn't even know this.
Did you know that? Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And they took Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and compared them to the movie Groundhog Day, and there was a lot of familiarity.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, exactly what you said, I think, just to take it piece by piece, is the first part is that it feels so slow because nothing changes, right? In our grief, it's like you live almost the same level of pain every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think in the movie, he gets really frustrated and he'll go to any extreme just to change it.
Yeah.
And I think that we will go sometimes to any extreme just to change our pain, just in some way. Like, what can I do to get this to stop?
Yeah, to just feel different, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, it was interesting because in the movie, it took several days for him to realize that he was stuck.
Yeah.
And they say that that's a lot like grief, in the fact that sometimes if we do get stuck on something where we're not moving forward and it's over and over on the same thing, is that it takes us a while to realize that we might be stuck in a spot.
Yes.
one of the thoughts is when you feel stuck, to ask friends how they see you are coping, grieving, or dealing with your hurt. Because I think sometimes we feel stuck, but we're really not. If we ask others, they can see movement in us that we can't see ourselves.
Mhm. It reminds me of very much of even having people on the podcast, because
Had
I have people on the podcast and they will tell me there is no way that I'm going to sound as good as those other people sound. They all sound like they're all together and doing great, and I'm just not going to be that way. I get
Mhm,
that almost from every single person that I have on. And it's funny
mhm.
because I just interviewed somebody today and she told me that same thing, and I said, "You know what? That's what every single person says, and they all sound great and they're all doing great because you're doing better than you think you are in really everything."
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you ever find yourself, Marcy, asking friends or someone, "How do you think I'm doing?"
No, I don't think I ever did, and honestly, I probably
Oh.
didn't because I was afraid of what the answer would be, because I thought for sure the answer would be terrible, that you're doing terrible, right? Or that if they
Mhm,
didn't say terrible, they
mhm.
were just
Yeah.
lying, so it didn't really matter. So I didn't ever ask that question. Mhm.
Yeah. I think for me as a counselor, when I talk to people, I like to tell them changes that I notice in them. And
Okay.
sometimes it's the fact that on the first visit, they might cry the whole time.
Mhm.
And then on another visit, they can talk for a while and not cry. And I point that out. So just pointing out. And I think if there's friends and family that are listeners, for them to be able to point out that I see change in you, even if you don't.
Yeah, I think that is really, really helpful advice for sure. Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, then it talks I have a hard time remembering the movie, and I'm so glad you said it was 30 years ago,
Yeah. I know,
because
I
that
looked it
makes me
up.
feel better.
I looked it up and I'm like, "Oh my word, 30 years,
I
that's a
probably
long time."
should have watched it again. Mhm. Well, it's funny because I think there's probably some listeners like me. Our pastor, can relate to this movie, and he uses it a lot in illustrations just from his own life, how he felt like he was living Groundhog Day. Um, so I think it's been used a lot in illustration over the 30 years.
Yeah. Well, I imagine so. Mhm.
Yeah, right,
I do
because
want to
then there's a
apologize.
part where he's
I just
angry
wanna take a
and with
quick chance to apologize for our sound problem because it's not very good, and you can notice that there's big lags
Mhm,
here. I'm gonna try to fix that for when the podcast goes out, but I do apologize for those people watching the video, so sorry.
right. Yes, I do. I wish I understood what it was. I'm trying to give time and not just keep talking over my too, so I might be giving too much of a delay.
Mhm.
Um, but then it talks about the anger and the frustration, um, and that's part of when nothing changes and we feel every day is the same level of hurt, we do get frustrated by that.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. You just want things to
And
be
I think we
different.
need to acknowledge that that's part of it. Yep,
Mhm.
yep.
Mhm.
And I do think that there are many people that when they get that part in their grief, they realize this is my life now. And they
And that's scary. That is so scary to think that is
Mhm,
my life now.
it
Mhm.
is. Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Um, the other part that it said, in comparison to the movie is then the sad part comes when he was dreading sleep and then what the next day holds because he knew he was gonna wake up and the next day was gonna be the same.
Yeah. Mhm. I've talked to lots of
Yeah.
parents who feel
So
that
I
way.
do think that we do. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said about bereaved people are so brave because you do get up the next day even though you know it holds pain in it. But I think just to make that awareness that, at the beginning and for a long time, grief feels like this. This is what it's like. Um, the other part is he begins to bargain and tries to change the situation by trying to escape and distract or reduce the pain of living. And you mentioned that he does try to end his life. Right? Is that what you said? He was running his car off the road?
Yeah. I think he
so I
with a
mean,
car
he
or
went
something.
to yeah. And then there, when I think of bargaining, I think, we bargain with God, we bargain with, just everything around. Like, really, what can I do?
Yeah.
What do I have to give up? What do I have to surrender so that I don't live like this?
Yeah. It's just so hard when you feel that pain all the time.
Yeah. And you may come to a similar conclusion that you can't move forward until there's that internal change. And that's what happened to Phil. Is that
Yeah, that's right. That was his name. I couldn't even remember the main character's name. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
He finally was able to.
There's that internal change. So pain changes us, and there's no such thing as choosing no pain. Of all the choices you have, the one that says, well, I'm going to choose that I don't have pain isn't an option.
Right.
Yeah. I should have told you that I have a cold as well. And when I talk too much,
we are not in a good place today
sore.
For you few people who are watching.
No, we are not.
So anything else you feel like you want to say uninterrupted? So I'm not going to say anything. Just kind of go for a little bit.
Oh, well, do you want me to keep going with this and then?
Yes.
Because I'm just kind of drawing the same comparisons. Okay. Only choosing one type of pain or the other. So it's not that we can't choose pain. It's like, well, what pain, what am I going to do? And the part is what is your pain going to teach you? First of all, about yourself. And none of us signed up to want to learn this, right?
No.
So what does the pain teach us about ourselves, about others, and then about God? Excuse me. So then the question becomes, is your pain productive or destructive? And I think in the movie, he tries to use it for good then and make it productive.
Yes.
The destructive part of pain, when we're living it over and over again, is that it traps us into some unhealthy habits.
Right.
And I think one of the first habits that comes to my mind when it comes to wanting to distract ourselves or numb ourselves would be the use of alcohol or drugs.
Yes.
Because that's really tempting to have that unhealthy pattern.
Well, it just makes you maybe not feel it so much, right? Because it's so hard when you feel this pain. And if you can do something to make that pain feel less, well, that seems like maybe a good idea.
It does. It really does. But, it's not a healthy pattern. And I think sometimes.
No. Because overall, you need to get through the pain. You need to feel it, right? You need to feel it. What did you say? Feel it to heal it?
Feel
or
it.
is that you or is that somebody else?
Absolutely.
But anyway, you need to feel it to get through the healing. So I think when you turn to something like drugs or alcohol, it can numb that, but then you're not healing either.
Right.
It's just like you're just stopped and just stuck right there. And until you can really start to feel it, you're not going to be able to even start healing, really.
Right. And that's
hard to so much about feeling stuck and feeling like you can't start healing. And that can take a long time anyway. But when you use drugs or alcohol, it can prolong it even more.
Right. And it's not just that. I mean, people can use sleep.
Right.
Like just numb. It's just, I'm going to sleep it away. Staying busy, that can be destructive at times where you're just so busy that you're not being productive in grief work, but you might be accomplishing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Other stuff. So those unhealthy patterns. So maybe to ask yourself, is my pain productive or destructive? But what he began to recognize is that his self-centeredness, that he needed others and that he didn't have an ability to connect with others.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I had just recorded something before I got on, and I didn't realize about the connectedness to this. When we decide where we want to go, whether
Mhm.
it's, we decide and we make a decision. And one of the things is that when deciding how to have meaning and purpose in your life, literally means that we have to connect with others. That's just part of it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so he realized that too. And then he had to risk the authentic and vulnerable relationships.
Yeah. Mhm. The nice thing that he had is he had a do-over every day for a while there,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, "Oh, that didn't work. I guess I could try something else." And in the real world, we can't quite do that, have
Yeah.
an exact do-over, but
You can't quite, but I do think there's a grace period and a growth period in grief where I tell people, try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. If you want to be creative, um, and it doesn't happen right away, try something other way to be creative,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If you decide you want to get involved in an activity and you try a photography class and you hate it, then the next time try something else,
Yeah.
right? So it does take some trial and error, and I hope there's some grace for bereaved people, in figuring out, who am I now and what does this look like?
It's so funny that this is very timely because I interviewed somebody today. Now, of course, this interview will not air for another 4 weeks, but
Mhm,
it was really interesting because she really was talking through trying to find her new purpose now in
mhm.
life and had come to several ideas already, and some are still possibilities and others aren't, but it was really a nice I don't know, it was nice, I think, for people to be able to hear how you can be several years out and still be just trying to kinda struggle to find your purpose, but knowing you're still working on it. I mean,
Oh,
that's totally fine.
absolutely. But in all of life, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
in grief, again, it's like you were knocked down and it's a whole rebuilding. I mean,
Yeah.
it is it's kind of I read a book on divorce once and they talked about building your marriage like a puzzle. And when you get a divorce, it's like someone came and threw up all the pieces. And I thought, well, grief is a lot like that too. And
Mhm,
it takes a while to look at each piece and figure out, where does it fit now? And is this part of my new picture, or is that, treasures from the past?
mhm.
Mhm.
'Cause that's fine too, and I think about too, I just had a few weeks ago, a woman on, she's from Northern Scotland, and she started that Abbey Sparkle Foundation, and she started, like, within weeks of her daughter dying,
Ugh.
and she's really dedicated to it and puts a lot of time and effort into it, and it's amazing and wonderful. So she found her purpose right away, right?
Mhm,
I didn't. I
mhm.
didn't at all. I feel like it was about a year when I put out the podcast, just a little over a year, and I felt like, "Yep, I think this is my purpose." But yet, that's actually fairly early too.
Yes.
I
Mhm,
feel like a lot of people even are hesitant to come on the podcast because they haven't found that sense of purpose yet
mhm.
and something to kind of do with their grief yet. That's totally fine. I mean, it's absolutely 100% understandable, and you may always be searching for that perfect fit, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And I don't want the listeners to feel like they have to start an organization to
Oh,
have
no.
purpose or to change a law or to do that, because your audience is different.
I mean, sometimes it's just little things.
It is. It is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's doing what you did, but maybe just in a little bit different way.
Mhm.
And your
And I
outlook maybe a little different than what it used to be.
and I think with most bereaved people, if I look back throughout the years, I can honestly tell you that they find, um, a sense of appreciation in things
Mhm.
that they didn't have before, and living life with an appreciation for relationships, for creation, for whatever it is an awesome way to live
Yeah.
life.
Mhm.
It is. You're just more open, you're more sensitive, you're more real, and that's what, it talked about in the movie, how he risked authentic and vulnerable relationships. When I think of a support group
Yeah.
and that when you finally are dealing with it, and I think people who are in a support group, I gotta think about saying this, but I think they're not as stuck sometimes as those who might not be sharing with others, because what a support group does is it helps you face the pain because others are facing it and you have a safe place to do that.
Exactly. You have a sounding board
Yeah.
for what you're feeling in that moment.
Mhm.
I mean, I think about that a lot with the virtual support group that I do through Starlight, about how amazing that is. And when we have a hard day, we have each other now to be able to kind of turn to, and the understanding that you get just helps you get through those little things that you might not otherwise have been able to, right?
Right. Right.
So speaking of that, I do want to take a minute to pause because the next Starlight session starts just next week.
Okay.
So, and this is a 6-week session. And Gwen, this one is my favorite. I don't know if you remember what my favorite one is, but my favorite session is on lament.
Cement. I
What
thought
is
you were
lament?
gonna say that.
Love that one. Love
Mhm.
it. I do think now, it's funny. I was thinking about why did I like that one so much? And I feel in some ways it's probably the first time I was actually really ready to be there. Because
Mhm.
remember how I came so early
Mhm.
and I was like
Mhm.
3 weeks in or whatever. And I didn't even really feel like I belonged, but Eric really wanted to be there. And so we all just kind of went, and I would have to tuck out at times. I would have to like leave the room at times because
Mhm.
it just got to be so hard for me. But I think by the time we were on our third session, then on lament, some months after Andy died, this was the first time I could really do it well and
Yeah.
appreciate it. So I think that's part of it. But I also do think it's just beautiful, beautiful, just lessons there, and just to understand grief so well when you think of it in the form of lament.
Yes. Oh,
So,
and talk about vulnerable and authentic,
yeah,
because you don't have to hide that deep, deep pain.
yeah.
And we're not saying that you have to share it with hundreds of people. I don't want people to think that that means they have to. It's not everybody's style, but as long as you're not hiding it from yourself.
Yeah. Well, in the virtual support group, it's, usually maybe a dozen people. It's not like it's a
Yeah.
huge amount of people. I remember that first week where the who was the leader read through the little kind of thing at the beginning. They just this
Mhm.
whole page that you read and about lament. And I just I remember exactly what I said, because I spoke up and I said, I never had a word for that. I
Mhm.
never had a word for it. I
Mhm.
always just called it the bad cry,
Yeah.
because it would be when I would be on the floor in Andy's room, which is where I am right now, just sobbing, 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 and being unable to stop. And for the first time that night in that support group, I realized that was lament. That's what I was
Mhm.
feeling, was
Yeah.
lament. And I never knew that and I never understood that. And it was just a powerful moment for me. Oh, so anyway, if
No.
if you are interested and would like to become a part of the support group, you can email Stephanie at starlightmin.org and they can do an intake. Remember, this is a Christian faith-based organization. So we do talk about faith, certainly in God, in our group. But if you would like to join a group, that would be great. We're to a couple of groups now. So we've grown out of just having one and we're on to 2 groups. So
Wow.
anyway, feel free
What
to email.
what I've learned is I almost now, I mean, because obviously, I was one of the
Yeah.
authors of writing that, um,
Yeah.
is I call it now the lament advantage.
Okay.
There's an advantage to
Yeah.
that kind of honesty, there's an advantage to do that. right? Because the only feelings that don't heal are the ones that we hide. And so we often hide them, like I said, from ourselves and from God, and we don't have to do that. There's an advantage. I just, people have slogans all the time about, so and so the advantage, or they always in marketing talk about the advantage of this product or that product. And I think, man, there is such advantage in lamenting.
And I never, ever thought that until we went through
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Ever. I definitely thought those were my worst moments. Those are the moments I really didn't want people to see. I mean, talking about being on the floor in Andy's room. And I remember one time I was just sobbing so uncontrollably that my foster son, Valeriano, who was living at home at the time, came all the way upstairs, and his room was in the basement, so 2 floors away. So he came all the way up and he had no idea what to do. He like just put a hand on my leg or something because he was just flustered. And I think I don't know what he thought was happening, but I was just embarrassed. And I thought, I can never let this happen again. Let other people see me like that again. But really, I think it was healing and a good thing for me.
You're not the only one, and that's why I keep saying most people do that alone, and they feel shame in it that they have such deep, but again, the definition of lament is a passionate expression of sorrow.
Yeah. I was certainly passionate. That's
have we had any comments? I haven't seen any.
We have not. But again, we started out in so bad with.
Is it getting better?
I think we're much better now. I think
good.
I can see you perfectly and there's no lag anymore. And so the last about 12 minutes or so, I think have been good. But
good.
That might be why we have no comments. So if you are watching and would like a comment, that'd be great. The other thing that I had suggested is that maybe this would be a good time to do some of those stories of hope, those little messages of hope, because we didn't do them over Christmas and no one emailed me any, so there won't be any. But if you want to for the future, I would sure love sharing those stories.
I'm trying to think if I've heard one lately from somebody. I did ask one woman a permission to share her story. I think I asked her, I said, can I share this? And I'm trying to, there is a hope spin on it, but it was just really interesting. It kind of has to do with the year ending. So her son died in 2022, her adult son. She's an older woman, and she said 22 was always her favorite number. Her kids used it in sports. It was her lucky number if she bought a ticket for something. That 22. Okay. So in 2022, her son dies, and she hated the whole year. So she said she had never stayed up to watch the ball drop, but she had to know for sure that 2022 was done. So maybe it's a lot like the Groundhog Day. She wanted to make sure that it was not coming back. So she said she stayed up and she watched just to make sure that new beginning was happening, and 2023 actually began. And so when I think about hope, I mean, it's just an interesting story how she just stayed up in her living room, just hoping for something different in 2023. And I think when we think about the Groundhog and Day After Day, that was just her, got to look for something else. It needs to get better, and just leave that behind.
Oh, okay. Somebody just did write in. Can you give that email address again for the Starlight group? So you can email Stephanie at starlightmin.org. So Starlight, STARLIGHTMIN.org. And you can actually email Stephanie or Micah. Micah would be another one, and that is MYCAH for Micah. Or Stephanie is STEPHANIE.
And if they go to starlightmin.org, there's a place to fill out a form right online, a contact form.
Okay, perfect. So that's even,
and then they'll email them back.
So anyway, just know that we would love to have more people, because I just feel like it's just a great ministry. It really is.
Yeah.
So a couple other things I wanted to touch on today too. One is I had, last time we got on, Gwen, I talked about, asking people if they could give some donations, and which I have gotten some donations, and I thought it would be nice, just at my husband's encouragement, to kind of give a little bit of shout out to thank people that had
Oh.
been donating. And I'm not going to give last names. I'm just going to give some first names, and if they gave in honor of someone. But I just feel like I should probably start doing that because it's just nice, and I certainly appreciate it. It helps us be able to cover some of the costs, just so it's not all out of our pockets. So I appreciate it. And I'm just going to go through kind of my little list here. So I just want to say now thank you to Pat, to Carol, to Jennifer, who gave in honor of Sam, to Sheila, who gave in honor of Angelo's birthday, to Dorothy, who honored her 34-year-old son, James, to Farah, who donated for Hannah's birthday. Thank you to Pauline, to honor Scott. Thank you to Katie, to honor Poppy. And thank you to Carrie. Carrie actually was Andy's BSF leader, so that was definitely in memory of Andy. Thank you to Colleen. Thank you to Dana, who donated in memory of Brogan. Catherine donated for Ella. Thank you to Elizabeth. Thank you to Deborah, who honored Avon. Nancy, who honored Alexander the Great. Andy, who honored Asher. Aaron, in honor of Dakota. Archie, in honor of Garrett. Jamie, in honor of Judson. Arava, who donated really for the her son Garrett for the Garrett Hill Goodness Foundation. And lastly, just a few days ago, a thank you to Emma, who donated in honor of Sam. So that's quite the list. And I just want to appreciate all of you for doing that. And it's funny, as I feel terrible that I haven't done it before, but if you donate through GiveButter, so givebutter.org, or you can donate through our website, but GiveButter makes it pretty easy to do charitable donations. And Eric was getting these emails and he didn't know it. So I get some of them, but not all of them for some reason. But Eric was getting all of the emails and had no idea where they were. They went into some funny inbox, and all of a sudden he's like trying to do the tax information for the Always Andy's Mom charity, and didn't and realized, oh my word, there are all these donations here and all these emails that I didn't even know existed. So anyway, I'm going to start doing that going forward. Thank you.
Yes, what I loved about that is, as you were beginning, I thought it's kind of like on radio stations or, Christian radio stations, how you could sponsor a day in honor of someone. But I love then how people were doing that for birthdays and anniversaries. And so that's a great way to honor your child and help other bereaved parents.
Well, and it wasn't even our idea, obviously. I mean, people were doing this in honor of their birthday, and they didn't even know about other people doing it. So that is really, really special. I'm glad that people did that. And anyway, I just going forward, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So the next thing too is this is also Eric. There's a lot of Eric in today's live stream. So this is another Eric thing that's been encouraging me to do, is he wants me to do an Ask Me Anything episode. Okay. So ask me anything. And the thing is that it's going to be him and I doing it together. So if you have a question for me, you email Eric. So his email address is eric@andysmom.com. ERIC@andysmom.com. If you have a question for Eric, you email it to me, to Marcy, MARCY, @andysmom.com. And so we are not going to see the questions that people write for each other. And we'll see how long it takes us to get a bunch of questions. I don't know, because clearly I didn't get a lot of stories this last time. But I'm excited about it. He's been super enthusiastic about it. He does this basketball podcast now. And so they did an Ask Me Anything episode, and it was apparently awesome. And so he wanted to do it for me too. And he was willing to actually be one of the people that are asked the questions. So I thought that was cool, because a lot of people have questions for dads. So again, I don't know when that's going to take place. I don't know exactly how we're going to do it. It really depends on what kind of feedback we get. But
I think that's awesome. Yeah. And I think especially about marriages, to have, both of you responding and different things so people can ask questions. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think we'll have a
Mhm.
good time doing it anyway. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes.
Well, look at him full of creative ideas.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then, of course, the next thing is the other thing I wanted to make sure to talk about is our next live stream. So the next live stream that we do. But you know what? I'll hold off on that a minute because we just got a question that came through.
Mhm.
So the question says, "Hi, Marcy and Gwen. When you were talking about a purpose earlier, I remember feeling pressure to find my purpose for quite a while, which then
Mhm.
felt a little stressful. And when I realized at that time that my purpose was just taking care of me,
Yes.
that felt like a step in the right direction." Oh, love that.
Yes.
I love that.
I do too. That nurturing yourself and just saying, I'm going to take care of me is huge.
Yeah, you know what? That came up in the discussion that I had earlier today too, because that mom had said sometimes she felt like she was being selfish. And I said,
Mhm.
"No, that's not what you're
Yeah.
being. You think it's being selfish, but what it is grief is really personal.
Mhm.
It's really personal and really intimate. So that means you have to turn inward to yourself to kind of understand your grief and work through your grief. And so that feels selfish because it
Mhm.
has to be turning inward and it has to be personal. So I think that's what you're talking about too, there,
Mhm.
Denise, is that you have to take care of yourself. And it might feel like not the right thing, but it's 100% the right thing.
Mhm. Yes. I love it. And again, that pressure, stress that she felt, and that's why I said that it doesn't have to be this big, huge in neon
No.
lights purpose. It's, that I'm gonna survive for my family and take care of, what I have left and take care of me and be as healthy as I can be. And I've had many parents say that they do that to honor their child who died because they'd want me to take care of me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which
They'd
is
want me
true
to
for
be,
sure.
yes. Mhm.
Mhm. It's hard to sometimes believe that, um, but you have to believe it yourself too, because I've had other people tell me how Andy would want me to feel, and
Mhm.
that I hate. I hate
Right.
that. But if
Yep.
I can think myself how Andy would want me to feel, well, that's different.
It
That
is.
I
Yep.
appreciate. Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
Yep. I feel like I've heard so many stories of hope, but now that, like, the pressure's on, I can't think of them, but
Well,
I
and had we not had 20 some minutes of technical difficulties before we even tried to
yes.
start, you would have had time because I thought,
Yeah.
first thing I've gotta do is tell her that I don't really have any stories of hope and see if she's got some, because you usually
Well,
do,
yeah,
but now
I
you're on
can
the
tell you
spot.
that yeah, I can tell you that I met with a widowed woman, um, whose husband died suddenly, and it's been over a year, and one of the blessings is she's met some other widows, and they support each other. But what she discovered is she doesn't like being around them because they're still in the same spot, and she
Yeah.
can see that she is ready to enjoy life. And when she's mentioned, like, "Oh, maybe we should go do this, or you wanna try this, or do you wanna travel?" They're not ready. And so she said, "I've outgrown my grieving friends."
Yeah.
And it's sad, but yet she's celebrating that because she can actually see that she's not in that same spot. And that's the other piece, though, is again reminding her and everyone else is that everyone does it in different time
Yes.
frames. So it's not like her friends are bad or
Nope.
that they're not grieving well. It's just a
Or
different
that
time
she's
frame.
bad or not
Right.
grieving well.
Right. And
Mhm.
she had to question that. She said to me, "Is that bad that I don't want to be in that say like I'm not there anymore?" I said, "No, that's not bad."
No. I
Yeah.
know, I totally get that and understand that, and at the beginning, you are feeling that grief 24/7, right? All the time,
Mhm.
every waking moment, but it gets to
Mhm.
a point where I couldn't I couldn't do that, and
Mhm.
it wasn't good for me, and so you have to try to surround yourself with people that are in maybe similar spot than you. Mhm,
Yeah. Yep. And so that she could that was a measurable mark for her.
mhm,
Mhm.
mhm. Yeah. Love that. I feel like I have had other stories told to me too that I cannot come up with right now either.
Yeah.
So if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, any question you would like to ask, or any little anecdote you want to type in, go ahead. You can go ahead and do that. That would be great. Um, anyway, the anything else you wanted to make sure to talk about here, Gwen?
No, I have some thought in closing about Groundhog's Day, but we can do that at the end.
Okay, so the next thing I guess we can talk about then is our next live stream. So the
Mhm,
next live stream episode we are going to do is on the physical effects of grief. Mhm.
mhm.
And that was something that you had kind of come up with. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I have people question or email me frequently saying, I'm feeling these things, or um, they're having some reactions, or other people are, and they're wondering if it can be unresolved grief. And if we
Okay.
don't deal with it, are there responses that our bodies have? And the answer is yes, that it can come out. And you mentioned like we have to feel it to heal it. And if we're not, um, it can affect us physically.
Mhm.
And so just kind of talking about that, and maybe people can write in, maybe some of the responses that they're having, or ways that they realize that their body was reacting until they started dealing with it. And then those things clear up. We'd love to hear those things too.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, I've always had migraine headaches my whole life. I mean, that started when I was 3 years old. So this is not a new
Mm.
thing for me. But after the accident and after Andy died, did that get a lot worse? Yep, it certainly did. I mean, I carry all my tension up in my shoulders anyway, and when I was feeling so much grief and so much tension, it just all went in my neck and shoulders, and it just triggered my head to just be out of
Mhm.
control all the time. So
Yeah.
that's just, one simple thing. Mhm.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess we can save that conversation because I have a few thoughts, but I think about the Groundhog Day and what we were talking about when you um don't deal with something, that some people just keep it going back to the doctor for physical things, not
Yeah.
realizing that it's a heart issue and that it's an emotion that they have to deal with.
Well, and honestly, I can say this because I am a doctor and a
Mhm.
physician, is we don't do a very good job in general of teasing that out, right?
Right,
I think
right.
we look for a physical cause, and that's what we're taught to do is really look for all the physical causes, and then if we've ruled everything out, then you can go to, I think this may be emotional, uh, and it's not great because what we basically do is rule out all these things we can do something about, and then if it gets to the point where we've ruled all that out, then we say, "Yep, you probably need a therapist." I mean, that's not healthy and
Right.
helpful to anyone to have
Mhm.
that be the way it's addressed in the medical system, but it often is. And
Right.
our training is just really, really poor
Mhm.
to handle kind of physical complaints caused by emotional things. I mean, honestly, I think I'm way better at it now. No question. I can have those conversations with teens that are anxious and having all sorts of physical symptoms. I can have those conversations so much easier now than I used to. But that's only because I've gone through so much emotionally myself and I'm
Mhm.
more comfortable talking about it. But I
Mhm.
still don't feel like the average physician is great at that.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%.
Mhm.
Yep.
So when we do that live stream, we're also having a special guest on who is going to be talking about a retreat that she is hosting in Mexico come the end of October, beginning of November. So, and that's really doing yoga and breathing and focusing on the body and the mental aspects of helping your body feel better through some
Mhm.
of those kinds of
Mhm.
practices. So, she's going to be coming on and telling everybody more about that, which I know you'll appreciate. It's Erin, who's been a guest on the show
Mhm.
before, when she talked about her daughter Dakota. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that conversation and to her joining in with us on that because
Right.
I think that'll be
That will
healthy.
be good. Very
Mhm.
good. Mhm.
So, is there anything else you felt like we wanted to talk about that you wanted to talk about today? I know we're a little bit short on time, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
we
We
always
don't have
go
to go
over
the whole
people
thing.
right. I think the point in the comparison back to the movie is it's so similar that if we're to move out of our grief, we have to move into a new and vulnerable state. Like we have to get to that spot where we're open, like
Mhm.
it's there. And unfortunately, the longer we hide pain, the longer we seem to stay in it. So I think using this episode, if someone is stuck and it's the same thing. Now, I know that early grief is that way, but if over a period of time you're still feeling that way, that maybe you have to get to that vulnerable part of looking at the
Yeah.
feelings and not hiding them.
Well, and that leads back to you, I would say, Gwen, with your grief guide, right? I think that is something that you can definitely help people
Yeah.
with and
Mhm.
that. And we talked about this a couple shows ago that we did that if you are interested in starting Gwen's video series, I've got some coupons. I actually had to buy more, which is fantastic because we had people
Yeah,
wanting to get to be able to
that's
hear
good.
Gwen's videos. So just know that Gwen can be a great resource, and I would love for more people to get wisdom from you. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know
Thank
how I
you.
would have gotten through this without you. So
Yeah.
again, if you would like that coupon, email me. So Marcy
Yeah.
at andrewsmom.com.
Can I
Um,
just tell you one other thing that came out of one of your listeners is that there's a group of ladies that were meeting in a library and they were bereaved moms who had met and they wanted to keep meeting but just needed some structure. So I kind of helped them structure their group. Well, I just sat down this last weekend and decided to write a whole year's support group prompts and ideas. So we're going to put that on my
oh,
website. So if someone wants, not a big
start your own group.
formal thing,
Mhm.
but just like, hey, January, here's 4 support groups. February, it's every month, 4 lessons, and they can have their gather some of the moms that they know or people, and then they have the guide right there.
Oh, I
So I'm
love that
excited
idea,
about it.
Gwen.
It should be on my
Oh, and
website
you
in
know
the
what?
next week or so.
I had one more thing that I was going to talk about. This
Okay.
is another Eric thing. I told you Eric's been doing all these things. So
Yeah.
the other thing that Eric worked on for the website is to have a forum. So to have an
Oh,
area where people can come on the website and share thoughts and ideas and things that they're going through and just to be able to go to for support. So I can't believe I almost forgot that because I guess the form is ready to go. So I am going to
okay.
start working on that. So you can go to the Always Andy's Mom webpage and there's now a spot that says forum. So anyway, there'll be some
That's
people helping me
awesome.
to moderate that and hopefully get some kind of good discussion going on the forum. So again, go to the andysmom.com website.
Yeah, because I'd love to maybe that could be a place, and Eric can probably help us because he's got great ideas. It's like when moms give all these ideas, we do need a place that has all of those. So,
Mhm.
like when I meet newly bereaved people, I can go, there's a whole ideas from people from all over what helped them. And I just love it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think we'll be great. So yes, Eric's full of great ideas today. So big, huge shout out to him. He's going to have a
Yeah.
big head after he listens to the podcast this week. But
Something just came to me that I don't normally do, but when you were talking about your listeners or your guests saying like, I'm not going to come across as together as this person or that person, your guests are amazing. And them being vulnerable to share
yeah.
their story has helped so many people. And when I'm in a room with a family, as in just recently, whose child died and they are raw and broken, and I can
Mhm.
go and take them right to the website by the categories and say, here's all these people who shared their
Yeah.
stories who had a similar one to you.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, it's
And that's a
so
reminder that that's
valuable.
on there too, that you can go to the
Yeah.
website and look at episodes by category, and they are categorized by age of loss
Yeah.
and also by type of death loss. So those can be helpful. And there are some other categories as well, like if
Yes.
you lose all or multiple children, things like that. And you know what? I have one story, little story of hope, and it's
Good.
very much related to last week's episode. So last week's episode, if you all have listened, it was Xavier and Aiden's mom, and she was one that had said, "This is going to sound terrible. I'm not going to do well."
Mhm.
And what's funny is we finished recording, and the next day she wrote back and she said, "I don't want to air it. I don't want to. I
Mhm.
don't want to have it."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I mean, I would never want you to do it if you didn't feel comfortable with it." And so I had sent it off to my editor in Colorado. Great, great lady. And and her name's Stephanie too, actually. So I sent it to Stephanie, or I sent to Stephanie a message that said, "The one that I sent you last night, don't edit it. She doesn't want to go ahead. She doesn't want to do it." And she said, "Okay." And then what happened, like a week and a half later, she sent it back to me, edited. Because then she also sent the next one and she said, "You labeled this one wrong." Like, no, I didn't label that one wrong. It's because this was supposed to be, this is the one that I told you not to do. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. I just did it anyway." So I had it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to send it to her. So I sent it to her and I said, "I haven't listened to this at all. My
Yeah.
editor did it by accident. I told her not to do it. But if there's any of this you feel like you would want to have on at some point in time, we can save part of it, whatever you
Yeah.
want.
Right.
I just want you to be able to listen to it." And 2 days later, she wrote back. She said, "I've listened to it 3 times. I want you to go ahead."
Oh. Oh.
And that was so just heartwarming to me. And it was really a God thing because I felt like I very specifically said, "Do not edit this." And she did it anyway. And I
Right.
think it was really the right thing. And because it's so funny, she did not think that she exuded much hope. This is a woman who lost both of her boys in a tragic accident. And in my mind, she was hope. Like, she
Right.
was amazing. The fact that she was still getting up every day,
Right.
the
Yeah.
fact that she was functioning. I actually talked to my therapist about her and I said, "You know, it's so funny because she didn't think she was, she showed any hope." And I said, "I think she is hope." And my therapist was like, "Yeah, she is
Yeah.
hope. It's
Yeah.
going to be super inspiring to people." And I said, "I know. It's too bad that she doesn't want to be on because she would be so inspiring to people." And then that happened. So,
Oh, I love that.
right. So anyway, I can't believe I almost forgot to mention that
Yeah.
story, but I didn't mention it in the whole recording because she said, "Do it as is." And so I did. I just sent it out as is. I sent out the write-up that I was going to send. But I do want to share that story.
Yes, that's awesome. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, the next live stream will be on another Tuesday night, Tuesday, March 21st at 7 p.m. And we look forward to having you all there and hopefully not having any technical difficulties.
I hope
I'm
not.
so glad it only lasted for 10 or
Me
15
too.
minutes, but thank you. Thank you.